Hi, I'm Steve Younis, and joining me is Adam Schomer, who is the writer-director of the upcoming Selling Superman four-part documentary from Eye to Eye Productions. Welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be on a Superman homepage. I mean, come on. This is our people.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you were kind enough to give me an advanced preview of the upcoming documentary, which I sat and was riveted just watching. I kind of told you off screen that before we started recording that my wife is not a Superman fan as such, but tolerates everything that I do around the Superman homepage, and sat in on a couple of the episodes just because she had nothing else to do, and was like, is there more of these? Is there another episode? She was just riveted by this documentary, not necessarily from a Superman perspective or a collector
Right.
perspective, but just because it is an interesting story. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a background, kind of bring people up to date about what Selling Superman is about?
Yeah, the quick hook is that there is this 40-year family secret. And there was a comic book collection happening. They weren't allowed to talk about it. It, in many ways, destroyed the family, the hoarding and the secrecy of it. And the father stopped going on vacations. So what what turns out to be a treasure and a kind of a collection that's at world class level also comes with a lot of pain. So you get to unravel both the beauty of a treasure and the buddy story of what do you do with this, while that very act starts to open up all these wounds. And that's probably why your wife was resonating with it, because it's really a family story in that way.
Hmm.
It's everyone has a parents, and everyone's been conditioned a bit, so you can resonate and relate to what's going on here. So it becomes a lot of threads that pull us through. And as you know, in the comic book community, there are some really interesting just characters, people that are so into this collecting and heroes and comics. It's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I intentionally wore my
Oh my
Superman
gosh.
#1 T-shirt because it is central to this story. But before
Yeah.
we get into that, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background about how what initially drew you to telling this story of um, Adam and his family?
Of Darren. Yeah,
Sorry,
Darren.
Darren and
Um,
his family.
yeah, and I mean that brings us to the Superman, really, because he called me. We went to high school together, and we
Okay.
played soccer together. So we weren't in the same grade, so we weren't buddies hanging out drinking. But we played soccer together, and we had a nice, tight team, and everyone was friends. And took him under our wing as a younger kid. And but fast forward 25 years, and he calls me and says, "You didn't know this about us, but this was going on." And my dad had Asperger's, but it went undiagnosed, and it also really hurt our family. But this collection has that Superman #1, and what drew me to this story was partly how did comic books get such a value? How could a book be worth $3 million, $4 million? What about our society values these books so much, rarity so much, collecting so much, the movies? How did they pump the comic book prices up? Because all that did, happen in the call it the '90s and 2000s, and especially when Marvel and all that still started pumping them out. So to me, that was fascinating. What we value, why we value it. Because I'm not a comic book aficionado. I love Lord of the Rings. I love Star Wars. I'm like any kid, right? That grew up when I did, right? I was born in 1975. You resonate with these great tales, but I wasn't reading a ton of comics and I wasn't collecting, right? So it had its limit. So for me, it was fascinating from the outside, like, wow, how did we get here? What's this community like? Who are the people buying these two? Who is
Mm.
spending $4 million? And it turns out it's a lot less fascinating than Darren's story, which I didn't realize. As we filming, it keeps unraveling and unraveling. Like his aunt in episode 3 down in Florida, I had no idea. He didn't tell me just everything all at
Mm.
once, right? You keep asking and asking, and it keeps being revealed. And his brother plays a key part of the story, and his friend Brian, the fact that he had been a comic lover his whole life and was watching, he was one of the guys that knew, and he was like just waiting for 40 years to be able to look under the covers of these sheets, right? So um Yeah, the characters and the family just unraveled itself. But initially, it probably was that the value of the Superman, maybe the treasure hunt, and who would buy that kind of thing. But
Mm.
this, to me, is much more fascinating.
So you have a personal connection to Darren and his family.
Yeah.
Did that influence you at all in the way you told the story? I mean, obviously you're a filmmaker, beyond this, you've done other productions and things. So how is this different for you on a personal level and a
Yeah.
professional level, considering that you didn't have a connection to the person that you're doing the documentary about?
Yeah. Did it influence me? Yeah, we're always influenced, right?
Mm,
There's nothing objective ever, and in
no.
every documentary you have a point of view, and there's an element of poetry to it and storytelling. It's just how it is, right? You can't encapsulate an experience or someone's life in an hour and a half, or in this case, 4 episodes. So there's always that. But on a positive side, where it influenced me was that Darren had trust for me
Mm-hmm.
and opened up to me more than he probably would just some Hollywood type, because people get exploited. And part of what happens in the industry, as we see from reality TV, is they do exploit stories. So we were really clear that we would have boundaries, and if something was too sensitive, we could take it out later. So that allowed us to have deep conversations. And often I would tell the crew to, I would film alone. Basically, I would
Mm,
say, okay, audio guy sets up his stuff. Audio guy goes in the other room. I'm just going to shoot one camera on this because I just want this to feel really intimate and want Darren to be really, forget about the camera. And I did that with his mom once also. When she's like, erasing the books a little and all that.
mm-hmm.
That's just me alone with her, and she starts telling me stuff about her husband and about her dad that you never have these conversations with your friend's mom. You never ask, like, what did you love about your husband? So on one level, yeah, it influenced that he had trust for me, and he knew, to bring it around to films I've done in the past. He knew I made conscious films, meaning
Mm.
films that dealt with the inner world, and that I'm a good person like that, not looking to exploit. So where that helped me too is I've filmed a lot of pilgrimages. I've been on a lot of adventures, Iceland with a monk, riding motorcycles with my guru in India, to Kazakhstan, to the heart of Pine Ridge, Lakota area. Deep, deep, hard topics, dangerous places at times, adventures, but it's a pilgrimage. So I always think of everything as a pilgrimage. And as people find out, this was quite a pilgrimage for Darren, and and not really a spoiler alert, like he wanted to stop the film at many
Mm.
times, right? So that's how we begin the film, is him wondering why he should even do this, because it's a pilgrimage. It brings up a lot of shadows. I'm used to that. Okay. I know that's what happens. So, but Darren, not really. And that's a really tough position to be in. And he's really courageous, but it brought up a lot of issues for him and around filming that, we end up exposing in the film.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting as you're watching, going along, how many times that conversation of why are we even doing this? I don't know if I want to go ahead with this. I'm
Yeah.
regretting doing this, and you're like, well, I know there's 4 episodes, so I know that it continues, but you have that fear of like, oh, it's
Yeah.
going to pull the plug, and
Right.
you get worried about it. But so can you talk to us about Darren's father? I mean, he's obviously the key figure in this documentary, who we only see, obviously he's passed on now, so, and that's because of his passing that this has come about. But he is a
Yeah.
key figure in the story. Can you talk to us about him and his medical condition and how that all played a part into the story that's unfolding in this documentary?
Yeah, and so you see in the poster right here that we're looking at, he's that shadow figure that's meant to be his father there, but it's also in the poster there's light around it, meaning there's possibility. So for me, there's possibility for Darren, if he stops kind of looking at the stories, right? If for all of us, if we stop being caught up in the stories of our life or our past, we have great possibility. But also looming there is kind of the shadow of his father and the past. And yeah, I think, of course, his father plays a huge role, because as we start to see in the film, we unravel in the series, I should say, in the documentary series, that we see it's great because the father's passed on, but he's such a huge part of it, because
Mm,
we start to see the conditioning. We Darren keeps exposing like why he is the way he is and how his father treated him, So you get to know his father through that. You get to know his father through the mother. You get to know his father in episode 4 through some of his father's friends. Um, but we don't have much with the father himself. So to me, as a filmmaker and an audience member, part of it's left open of like you can decide how you feel about the father. There's no black and white villain here. There's no, he's not necessarily a villain. He just is the way he was. Um, and it caused issues. So there's some warnings there around collecting. There's some warnings about, okay, you mentioned his condition, Asperger's, which is now on the autism spectrum, ASD, autism spectrum disorder. But Asperger's is way far on one side where he was incredibly verbal. And a lot of people with autism are not. So incredibly verbal, very fixated, had trouble with recognizing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people you might know have Asperger's, but it doesn't go diagnosed, or they're just not open about it, or it just doesn't play out. And there's an expert we filmed named Temple Grannon that she's in the bonus features. We didn't end up putting her in the film, but she's an expert on autism. She said, yeah, in LA, like you wouldn't know because a lot of them fall into like editing and different very fixated alone type things where you can just do amazing work, but don't have to do so much on the interpersonal. And in the comic book world too, like if you have something cool to talk about that you love, that's where someone with Asperger's would thrive, where there's a topic we can really nerd out on and go deep into and fixate on and talk and talk and talk, works great. But on the negative side with his dad, he couldn't recognize when somebody was, emotionally hurting or bored, or gosh, he's talking too much, like I'm talking too much. But
That's never a bad thing when you're doing an interview.
Okay, you don't mind. Okay, because I can go on. But so yeah, it's a tough one because he's also a different generation, and things weren't diagnosed as early back then, and people weren't as apt to get help back then. People, weren't in therapy as much back then. Therapy was a bad word. His dad, we didn't talk about it too much in the film, but his dad thought therapy for people was kind of weak, and Darren had to get over that because, Darren's in therapy, his mom's in therapy. We talk about that in the film, and it helps them, and Darren's a big proponent for it. He's like, I think everyone should have a therapist. Like, it's really helpful to have someone to talk to. So I'm glad in society that's not a big deal anymore, that has shifted where you're not perceived weak. But that's a little bit of his dad and where the generation he was coming from, the condition he had, and yeah, it affects Darren tremendously. And Darren is really, as you said, like very open about it. That not to keep talking too long, but like when I first went and filmed them, I heard he told me about it, and I just went alone, and I said, well, let's just film your old house before it's gone, and I'll just film you and your mom and your brother. We'll just see how open everyone is. He's like, I don't know if how they'll be on camera, if they'll be up to it, but wow, in that house they just really opened up. I mean, that's most of episode 1 is me alone in that house with them, and them just telling it like it is. So from then on, I knew, okay, there's something here, because they're also very expressive, intelligent, verbal people who were willing to just lay it out there. And that you could have the same story, but characters that are just, not saying
off.
much and sitting. Yeah. And it wouldn't work, your main people have to be willing to let you in.
So what do you hope viewers take away from the balance between the value of these comic books, as you've spoken about, and the emotional toll that it does take on Darren's family?
I hope people on a really deep level, they look at their own family conditioning. I hope they look at their own way they see themselves, the story they tell about themselves to themselves, and whether or not they inherited that, from society, from their family, and whether or not they want to keep that story of themselves. Self-value is something, like I say near the end of the film, that the internal power is really the power I think is most strong and most important. And we have a power to look at the world the way we want to. We can perceive ourselves the way we want to. We can take in an event as a challenge, or we can take it in with a pity party, So I would love people to kind of question the way they see themselves, and hopefully come out and realize like that everyone is inherently totally lovable, and perfection is not something, or superpowers are not something that are as attainable or necessary. And it's more important like how you treat yourself and those around you. as one of our experts, Kevin Shinnick and Chris Vogler both talk about, that morals, it'll be sooner we have powers to fly than we do good morals in the way we treat each other. Like that's the harder power to
Hmm.
achieve, the way Superman is such a good Boy Scout, so to speak. Uh, and that was awesome. It's nice when your experts express those things that you as a director also feel like, so you don't have to say it, and the audience can hear it from some other angles.
Mm. No, that's really interesting because a lot of the debates around Superman as a character are, what makes Superman Superman? Is it his powers? Is it his the ability to fly and that he's invulnerable and all these things, or is it his heart? Is it who the character is as a person that makes
Yeah.
him why he's lasted for so long? So it's a really interesting that you kind of focused on
Oh, it's.
that.
I mean, it's definitely his heart. It has to,
Oh,
I mean, because right, because there's so many
for
heroes
sure.
since, but his character is unique. He really is.
Yeah, he's definitely that symbol for hope as has been portrayed
Mm.
so many times, and that's what's so important about about the character, not necessarily the powers and all the bells and whistles. But what were
Yeah.
some of the biggest challenges you personally faced during production, particularly with such a unique and sensitive narrative? You've mentioned that Darren wanted to pull the plug a couple of times. How did you navigate that? And like, dude, we could. This is, we can't end it here.
Right. This is really good. Yeah. As you can imagine, someone that's living the story doesn't like to necessarily hear like this is a great story. It's like this is
Mm,
my life.
yeah.
That was a challenge, of course, because if the filming is hurting someone,
Mm,
that's not what we're setting out to do. I'm setting out to help someone. I really, from the beginning, I thought this could help him grow, and maybe it sped things up quick. He's aware of that. It sped things up a lot quicker than he normally, but he's also aware that like it brought some stuff up that he might never have faced, and he's happy for that. Now,
mm,
I still don't think he would have chosen to do the film again, but it's still I know has helped him grow. So challenge, yeah, that was definitely a challenge. Knowing this film that I thought I was doing for the right reason and still do was at some points hurting my friend. That
mm.
was challenging. Absolutely. So I definitely had to dig deep and ask myself, am I in it for the right reasons? So it's a nice pilgrimage. And I tell everyone, I'll use the word pilgrimage a lot in my life, but I tell everyone involved, even the editors, I say, my projects are pilgrimages. Like something's going to come up for you. This will trigger stuff in you. Who knows what, but we're in it together. So I definitely learned how to even more so lead and just have trust that this pilgrimage was good for everybody. And other challenges, I mean, just holding a camera for 8 hours in Comic Con is challenging. It's a pain. It's nice to walk around with nothing, but when you're holding gear and a camera, because I'm second cameraman on like all the shoots, right? I have a guy from LA who's my main DP, Rama, and I brought him to Michigan sometimes. But then I had a Michigan guy, Logan. But I'm always running second camera. Part of that's just budget, and part
Hmm.
of that's just keeping a crew smaller for intimacy. But at those Comic Cons, man, that gets tiring. So that's to me physically, that was challenging. The neck pain and the shoulder pain, that's difficult too.
I can imagine. Geez. Talking about those Comic Cons, you bring in a lot of extra characters. Some of these collectors who end up helping sell part of the collection, or and they have their own stories and their own challenges, which was really interesting. That these characters not only add an extra element to the documentary series and the story itself, but show that everyone's got their, I was going to say their cross to bear or their heavy camera to carry.
Everyone has their camera to carry. Yeah, and the unique challenges some of the people have, like right, like Josh the Hatchback
Mm,
Kid or Eric the artist. And Darren tends to attract underdogs. Like he's
yeah.
very aware of that. He's like, I love the underdog. He says it in the series, right? I love the underdog. And his brother in many ways is an underdog. And Darren himself was born with a lot of superpowers, strong, smart, and he looks out for the underdogs. So Josh the Hatchback Kid has some health issues, kidneys, and Eric the artist. You pictured there the tall guy in the red shirt. has 10% of the movement in his hands, right? And he ends up being the
Crazy.
artist for the label. And I think these characters and his friends become good reminders for him, for all of us, really, of just gratitude and simplicity and coming back to what's important for all of us. I mean, it's hard. Phil, oh gosh, Phil's story with his daughter in there.
Mm.
Phil, yeah, that's kind of a. Did that get you? Did
Yeah.
that tear you up? Yeah,
Oh, massively. I mean, I've got my own personal stories with, with family and trying to have start a family and so yeah,
yeah,
so many things resonated on so many different levels, and it just I love the way that he explored all these people's backstories, not and their origin stories, if you like, which is a very comic book thing
sure.
to do,
Yeah,
and that you build them into the narrative, and it's you know Darren's father's choices didn't only just impact Darren and his mother and his brother, but their friends,
yeah,
these other people who come into the secret, and then the wider community as a whole. And the fact that you go out there and you ask people, what would you do if you're in this
yeah,
situation? And
yeah.
you get so many different answers, yeah, it's that's so from that perspective, that was really interesting from my as a viewer.
What would you do? Being a Superman lover, what would you do?
Well, I mean, you can see behind me, I've got a collection here. You're only seeing like 1/10 of it here, but
Yeah,
I think I would find it very hard to not, to sell it. I would hold on to something that, important. Um,
yeah,
and, millions of dollars is nice to think about, but, at the end of the day, how many people in the world own a Superman #1?
yeah,
And so, there are people out there who have millions of dollars, and they're a dime a dozen, and not as many as we'd like. But yeah, there aren't that many people who can say they own a Superman #1 or Action Comics #1 or whatever it might be. And so, I think yeah. And at the end of the day, I'd probably put it in a museum. I wouldn't just want to sell it off to someone who was just going to think of it as an item that was worth of monetary value.
yeah.
What about yourself?
Oh, I mean, I know for me, of course I would sell it. It's just, that's just, I think generations have a nice kind of cadence to them. And I interviewed my dad as part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Just, he's in the bonus features also. There's a few key bonus features. At one point, I was gonna have little interludes with people on how comic books, their story with them, how they related to them. But it ended up, as you know, being long as it is, meaning
Mm,
4 episodes versus we set out to do a feature length documentary, 90 minutes, and it
right.
just showed itself as 4 episodes, and I'm really happy that it did. But I interviewed my dad, and he started telling me that his father threw away his collection when he was at college, his comic book collection, and it
Mm,
devastated my dad. But ends up being the only thing that they ever really disagreed on, which
okay.
I could not believe.
That's
Like he's like
that's
one thing
rare.
in life that was it. And my
Wow.
grandfather lived to 100 years old,
Wow.
uh, or more. I think 102. But and so then he starts telling me, "Oh, your grandfather didn't collect anything. Your grandfather was really like everything was utilitarian. If he had a lot of stuff, it was tools
Mm-hmm.
because tools could make things." He's like, "But he
Had a
didn't collect
purpose.
anything." My dad's very much the opposite. Loves keepsakes, loves artifacts, loves nature, but and history and family trees. And then I'm the opposite. I'm like, I'd rather simplicity, a little more Buddhist in nature, of like less is fine. Uh, so to me, holding on to something like that, um, I get it. This to me, the story and the icon is cool, but having the book, nah, I'll move it on to someone that would love it. I'll take that money and go, get the place in nature that I would really like bring me a
Mm,
lot of joy.
yeah.
So I think, as Andy said in the series, he goes, "You replace one thing you love for something else you love,"
Mm.
and that's how I would take something I love and just get something else I love. Which,
If
yeah,
nothing else, I think this documentary will start that debate. In many conversations about,
yeah,
what would you do? Would you own it? Would you keep it? Would you sell it? And what does make you happy? Is it you know
yeah,
being able to sell that and buy a place on the beachfront property that you can just enjoy and sit back and relax and enjoy it,
yeah,
or is it setting your family up for life, and so that they don't have to struggle, they don't have to work, or is it that thing that you can look at it every day on that shelf and go, wow, I own this thing. You know, everyone's happiness is something different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the cool thing. That's the great thing about free country. That's the great thing about life. And then you get to choose what's valuable, what's
Mm.
important to you, and that's the cool thing. Like, being a non-comic guy, I don't come in with any disdain for the love. I
Mm-hmm.
see the love and the passion in people, and I thought it was quite innocent and amazing. And I kind of fell in love with the community in that way. Like, oh,
Mm.
everyone's just really happy here. Everyone seems to be themselves at these Comic Cons in an odd way, dressed up, but themselves. Uh, and I really appreciate, like, just anything that kind of brings us back to innocence and brings us back to being okay with ourselves, I think is precious in this society, because society does the opposite quite
Mm.
often, is trying to tell you you're not enough. As you can hear my commentaries in the episode 2, where I come down on our society a bit for kind of wanting us to always want more,
Mm-hmm.
and media plays into it. Anyway, I don't come down that hard. I could have slammed the media world pretty hard. I was pretty nice, I think, but I don't think the things I say are that revelatory. It's like, yeah, I know, but it's like, but that is the truth. So
Mm.
you go to Comic-Con, you see it, right? They're definitely playing in, like, you need to have this, you need to have this. But I in the end, I just think the community is amazing. I might not have as much to talk about on a day-to-day basis at Comic-Con with people,
Mm.
but I sure as heck love the energy of it and love that everyone's happy somewhere.
Mm.
Uh, that I find very, very sweet. So yeah, everyone can be happy and love what they love. I love soccer, and people would think that's crazy. So
No, I'm a sports fanatic myself as well, which kind of doesn't really correlate with being a comic book nerd. So there's yeah, a lot of interest out there from different people for different reasons. But
yeah,
how did the comic community, you say they play a big role in the documentary? How did you approach that? Was it something that you know, not being a comic book guy, was there any trepidation from you about how do you approach these people, especially going to Comic Con where you see all these people dressed up like, crazy
yeah.
costumes and what have you, and how important it is to them, and yeah. So what was your approach to that?
Just be nice.
Yeah,
The crazy, everyone wanted to be filmed, is what it came
right.
down to. People
Well,
dress
initially
up
there was a
because they
point
want the
where, sorry to interrupt, there was a point in the
yeah.
documentary where I forget the main collector who was doing the selling of the bigger
Oh yeah,
items. He didn't want to be on camera. He was like he kind of
yeah.
brushed Darren off a little bit because the camera crew were following him, so you had to kind of sneak around the corner a little bit and film that conversation.
Yeah, that's true. One of the dealers he was approaching, yeah, did get a little scared away by cameras, which I understand
Mm.
for sure. The dealers, but those in costume, no, it was
Yeah,
total
yeah,
opposite, right?
exactly.
Those in costume they're wearing a costume, they like to be seen. Chuck Rosansky, who pops in from Mile High, he's great. He's like, yeah, I'm here for the joy of it. I like to
Mm.
make people happy. It's like, but I don't care. I just posted something, one quote of his. He said, if you try to make everybody happy, you're an idiot.
Yeah,
He's like,
so
you
true.
just can't do it. So he said he calls himself Captain Alienation. Uh, but I just love people that are themselves, I guess, was what it would come down to. People that aren't afraid to love what they love, aren't
Mm.
afraid to dress up. So maybe they recognize that in me, that I was, kind of like appreciative of them.
Yeah.
People tend to open up pretty nicely. I mean, God, we didn't really go into it, but there was a guy we met at Comic Con San Diego, and we started telling him the premise of the film. He goes, "Oh, I have Asperger's too." He was dressed in Superman. He's like, "I have Asperger." He's like, "I found out 2 years ago, and now when I meet people, I tell them up front,
Mm.
hey, I have Asperger, so I might do X, Y, and Z, just so you know it's not personal." And I said, "That's really amazing." Like, very opposite from Darren's dad. He's like, "Oh, I
Mm.
have this condition, so let me A, work on myself, and B, tell other people so that they don't get put off." But he was just so open about it.
Mm.
And that's what I found. A lot of people on the spectrum were very, very open about it. And it's more like, yeah, it's a condition, and it's part of who I am, and that's nothing to be like.
I guess that's a generational thing, isn't it? We've come a long way in that
We have.
regard.
We have.
So kind of getting back to the collection itself, was there anything in particular that you found surprising amongst the collection that you discovered that you went, wow, like I was not expecting to see that?
Excuse me. I know you don't want to edit, so I'll try not
It's
to.
okay. I was going to say drink some water, but that was the problem.
It was. It went down the wrong pipe. Yeah, the whole thing was surprising to no, to see like a box of comics and they go, this is worth 80,000 right in here. That already was surprising to me. So people in the comic book world, maybe not so much, but they wouldn't have been. Or just, oh yeah, we found a book. Yep, this what could that be worth? 5,000. Just stumbled upon it. The fact that they were still organizing when I started filming, which is probably about a year, almost a year after
Wow.
he had passed, because they had got, I wasn't able to be there when they first were moving the comics from the house, so they'd already established these warehouses like this, the crates that we're seeing,
Hmm.
but the organization still wasn't that there. It's not like it was by year, it wasn't by alphabetical, it was just boxes still. So I was fascinated by the treasure hunt of, oh, what are you opening today? I don't know. Let's just open
Mm.
a box and see. And it's like Silver Surfer, and they're like, oh, we didn't know we had that. Like,
And there's 20
and
copies of it.
yeah, and 100 Star Wars ones. That I did find fascinating, and I won't ruin the story of the X-Men's and how he had six or seven incredible giant size X-Men shape. It's a cool story to learn that Darren ends up learning why his dad had those.
Mm.
That's what was cool and fascinating to be like, oh, that's how he got them. And and I guess people don't really collect like that where they just keep multiple copies of
Mm.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
So CGC have a big part to play in this documentary. You mentioned the artwork that was done for the label, that was legacy label. How did their involvement of experts like them shape the documentary?
It was great to have them in it, right? I mean, they were
Mm.
super willing, which was nice. Um, Obviously, Darren had made contact to them already with the collection, so they already knew of Darren, but it was nice that they were open to be on camera. So yeah, Matt Nelson, president of
Hmm.
CGC, nicest guy, really just gave us his time, let us film there. So yeah, it was great to have them be able to comment. Same with Heritage, with be it Matt McGee, Ed Jaster, rest his soul. He passed away recently as well. But yeah, they were just, everyone was, the quote unquote big dogs, right? The big
Yeah.
players, Ed, who was really high heritage, and Matt, who's the president of CGC. They're just lovable, nice people, right? And they're like, sure, we'll do it, we'll help out.
Nice.
And I think having a track record of documentaries, I've been doing it 15 years, helps. And having the trailer that we had
Hmm.
helped as well. Because we had that I had a trailer early on to show people this is legit. We know what we're doing. That always helps. So it was nice to have CGC on board and Heritage, because they let us film, an auction as well at Heritage, which
Yeah.
they didn't have to do, so they let us in.
Yeah. Very cool. Was there anything that didn't make it into the final cut that you were like you struggled with? I know you've said there's bonus material which we'll get to in a second, but was there anything that was hard to leave out or that you really struggled with about wanting to get in, but it didn't fit, the story you were telling or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there was, in looking back, there was other stories like Darren's cousin, and the way she spoke about Darren's dad, because she didn't really have a father that was around, so his dad was a father to her in many ways. But she also said, he was great in a father like that, but when she hopped on the phone with him, she knew to get a drink. She knew to grab a whiskey, because he was going to talk for 2 hours and just like go off on things. So there were more stories of Dale and other family members that I would have liked to get into, but as you see, like we meet a lot of family members and characters as it
Mm.
is, right?
Yeah.
And as a storyteller, there's just a nice balance with that of, oh, I want to introduce all these people and also keep a story going, and just keep layering in these characters that hopefully also do some to show you a greater picture of a family, as well as a portrait of collecting, as well as a portrait of the innocence and beauty of relationships within collecting, and sometimes when you're missing that relationship, how troubling that is.
Mm.
So there was more I wanted to put in, but you can only do so much. Beyond that, yeah, there were. I mean, gosh, there's so much that ends up on the floor, Steve. I mean,
I can
we,
imagine.
can I tell you how many terabytes of footage would that
Please.
would that? Yeah. So we have each drive, so to speak, is about 50 terabytes of.
How many
Yeah.
drives?
No, I mean like each. So there's 3 drives to
Oh,
make that. So
okay.
that's 50 terabytes, which is a lot of footage.
Yeah. Yeah.
100 hours plus, right? For sure. I mean, probably 300 hours. But we filmed a lot.
Yeah.
You just film and film and film. You're on the grounds of Comic Con. You just film and film and film. So yeah,
So, from a technical perspective, and I know there's, I mean, I do a bit of video editing and just for the website and the YouTube channel. Talk to us, briefly and on a layman's terms about some of the equipment and software that you did use to put it together.
sure. We edit on Premiere Pro, Adobe
Mm-hmm.
Premiere Pro. Um, we shot on the Canon C70s. C70 is the new big brother to the 5D, the Canon 5D Mark IIs, Mark IIIs, Mark IVs, which I shot a lot of films on. But I love Canon. So C70s are great because it shoots 4K, shoots RAW, but the files aren't so huge. And again, if it's too technical for people, that's okay. But C70s are wonderful cameras. They're not too big either, but they build out nice, and they're shooting with a sensor that is just as good as their big brothers, which is the Canon C300 Mark III. So when I found those cameras, I said, "Oh, this is perfect for what I'm doing and what I do in general." Like
Mm-hmm.
I go to Iceland, like I said, and I go to the Himalayas. So you like small cameras that are powerful and that the data is small enough. Workflow wise, we filmed November 21 for a bit, like I said, at the old house. Then we really started up May of 2022, and we were filming all through until May of 2023. That's when we started editing, was in May. And that whole process of editing took a whole year, but we were still filming different things as we were going, and always filming Zooms and audio conversations. So that's one thing I knew early on, is that this would be multimedia.
Mm.
So I recorded every phone conversation. I recorded all the Zooms. I shot some stuff on my phone, like in the cars when Darren and I were driving. I love
Mm-hmm.
it, gives it an intimacy.
Yeah.
But then you counter that with really beautiful camera shots and great camera guys. Like I said, Logan and Rama are both amazing, and drones and all that, and cool, like, keyhole shots, right? And cool shots that you were showing off, like the book and the Superman. And those guys are great. Stuff in the car, like, yeah, like that shot's great. That's super cool. And doing a lot of car stuff. So GoPros, I think no, actually we put our C70s in the car is what we did. We would mount them in a special way in the car to get good shots. And if you look, you can see like our audio guy in the back of one of in the car in episode 4. So little stuff like that. There's one other thing I can't announce yet, but I think I will. Maybe in a couple weeks, a thing I found in some of the footage that'll blow your mind. Yeah, I don't want to say it yet, but something we weren't filming and stumbled upon. Like, oh my god, that's in this. That's what are we seeing there? But yeah. I mean, that's the general workflow, and then there's a lot of music, of course, that goes into this, and color correction
Mm-hmm.
and sound production. It's Documentaries are long hauls. They're definitely long hauls. So it'll be 3 years, I guess, from the moment I started, but really 2.5 of 2 of total full time work, and then we've been in kind of distribution phase since May, where you're just getting things ready for what we're doing now.
Wow, that's dedication to the
Yeah,
craft. What kind of feedback have you received from early viewers, especially from comic book fans and collectors?
yeah, lovely stuff. Especially up in Portland. It was hitting people on an internal level, which is
Mm-hmm.
what I hoped. On a relational level, they were questioning their relationship with their fathers. But in general, people are also engaged, like you said, riveted, entertained, and you have to do that,
Mm.
And if you can add on that there's something underneath it that they're going to relate to and maybe look at their life different, you're really winning. But credit to my editors as well for keeping the pace up of the story. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, most people are like, oh, I'm riveted, I'm engaged, and they're questioning things. And to me, like, oh, that's great. That's what we're going for. And like, you know, the next documentary I'm doing, Aaron's Law. She watched some episodes. She's like, this, I could care less about comics. At a Midwestern wife, and she's loves it, loves the family story. So we're getting a lot of that. The comic book lovers, there was some oohs and ahs, in Portland. That was cool to hear. Like, oh, what are the comic book people oohing when they saw the multiples get pushed on the table?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them would go, oh, like that. And then when we meet Aunt Linda, the crowd audibly was like, oh my god, like they were just audibly when we met Aunt Linda. So those couple things, some of the books and some of the characters were causing reactions.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the bonus material. You got a VIP online screening that
Yeah.
people can be part of. There's a QR code in the top right corner if anyone wants to scan that to be part of this. You can watch all 4 episodes before the public gets to see it. And there's 6 bonus features, Q&A, free chance to win select comic books. Can you tell us more about this? What do you hope to reveal here at this event?
Yeah, we wanted to create a way for people to see it digitally. And it's not just on that day. Once they unlock it, you can watch it much like you would on, iTunes or anything like that. So, but we wanted to get it out in an easier way, especially for the comic book community, and add in extras and stuff you can't do on a lot of the platforms. So I have a Q&A from Ash Crossan, who she's a well-known interviewer or host on Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And goes to all the Comic Cons, interviews James Gunn and all these guys, right? But so through Friends of Friends, I got her to do a cool Q&A. We shot that well, so that's a special Q&A with Darren, myself, and Kevin Shinnick. Kevin is a longtime writer for Robot Chicken and Spider-Man and different things, and Kevin's a friend of mine from a long time ago. That's how I got him in the film, and I actually didn't know he was as nerdy as he is. Ash calls him like a nerd expert in the Q&A. Kevin has those Rocky 4 cards or whatever, Rocky 3
yes,
cards.
Yes,
that's Kevin. He's got baseball cards of Rocky, and you're like, what? What's going on? Why do you have that? But that November 7th is fun. The Q&A, the bonus features are very interesting. One of our production assistants ended up finding out that his dad had a box of comics that was 25 years old that they hadn't opened yet. So that's in there. Temple Grandin, who is an autism expert. Again, I wish I could have put her in the story, but it just didn't fit. She's amazing. So yeah, this is a cool thing. People can buy tickets now, and then on November 7th it unlocks. You can watch it all, and you'll have it for a year, just like anything. And hopefully, we really wanted the comic book community to see it early, be able to tell each other, create that base, so that when we're on Apple and Amazon and all that for rent and purchase, that the general public, when they hear about it through their comic book friends, goes, okay, I'll rent it there, I'll watch it there.
Cool.
Because it is resonating, whether or not you like comic books or not.
Yeah, for sure. So to finish up, what do you hope is the legacy of selling Superman, both in terms of Darren's story and the film or the 4-part series itself?
I hope this for Darren, it's a legacy of something he looks back on that he's happy that helped him grow, that his family can look back on and say that's pretty amazing that we've had this part of our life documented. I hope, I hope it becomes that for him someday. I don't think it's there yet. And I hope for the general public, it helps us all reflect on our habits, our collecting, and our relationships, and really, like I said at the beginning, how we value ourselves, and that we know we have that power to switch how we see ourselves and how we see the world.
Fantastic. Great way to finish off. Adam, so appreciate you being with us tonight to chat with this, chat about this epic 4-part documentary. It is an amazing view. I hope fans, not just of comic books or collecting, but just people in general, get to see this, because it is a true family story that I think a lot of people will resonate with, not just because of the collecting part of it, but just the relationship, internal relationships between family members, and the way you've filmed it and the people that you've brought into it. It's definitely one that I'll remember and go back and view multiple times. So thank you
Cool.
once again for the documentary, and thank you for being on supermanhomepage.com.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing what you're doing. I'm glad you're getting it out there. Thanks for the support. And I just encourage people when they see it to give a shout. Email us. Let us know what they think. We're there. We're humans behind the curtain.
So where is the best place for people to touch base with you? Is it on the website
Yeah.
sellingsuperman.com?
Yeah, go to sellingsuperman.com. We always have links to what's going on, meaning the November 7th, or if you're in Detroit, there we'll have a live screening. And yeah, our email's on there, film at Selling Superman. You can reach out and let us know what you thought, like it or not like it, whatever. And it's just nice to hear feedback, because as filmmakers, a lot of time that is behind the digital wall. So it's nice to hear from people. And, it might be nice for Darren and for everyone in the film to hear like, oh, this helped change me, and that might pick somebody up that day, if I share that with them. So
For sure. Well, thank you, Adam. Really appreciate your time tonight. And everyone go check out sellingsuperman.com. The 4-part documentary series is coming November, so make sure you check it out. I'm Steve Younis from supermanhomepage.com. Thanks, Adam.
thanks. See you, Steve.